Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, The Long Haul, and talk about some of the ideas I'd like to really emphasize. Let me just start by saying that The Long Haul, as you know, is the autobiography of Myles Horton. If you read the preface and the introduction, you'll see how the book came about, that people who were very interested in his work in the Highlander School wanted to interview Myles Horton, and over time he spoke to them, and they tape recorded his interviews and edited them and formed this book. Why Myles Horton in the Highlander School? Well, this is an important school that gave birth to a lot of leaders, social leaders of our time. Highlander School in Tennessee is a place where Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks went to train in nonviolence and think about and express their own views and develop their philosophy about a strategy for change. Labor leaders also went there. This is a place where the citizenship schools were born, where mass struggle regarding civil rights was developed. So it's a very interesting place, and the first 3 chapters are in some ways deceptively simple. I think you'll find it's really easy and interesting reading. And so I want to kind of delve here into understanding how Myles Horton developed his own philosophy and shaped his way of thinking. I've created a PowerPoint that brings up some of the major questions. So the Highlander School was a place that Horton developed with some other people. It was a place where there were training programs for activists in labor and civil rights. The beginnings of Myles Horton's life were shaped by his own family. He grew up in the mountains, and his parents were farmers, sharecroppers. His relatives were mill workers, and sometimes his own family worked in the mill. He talks about how his mom had compassion for others. She shared even in poverty, and that his dad was a storyteller. He mentions the story where his mom and his family were in a mill town, and the people were so poor that his mom made a lot of food and she gave it to everybody, and that night he went without supper. And this happened more than once, but he didn't feel resentment. He actually, thought that this was the way things were supposed to be. And you can see some photos of Myles Horton and his family as well in the book. So let's see. Here's a picture of his family in their house. So religion was a very big part of Myles Horton's upbringing too. He questioned predestination. He talks about finding his grandpa's books about religion that were Protestant, Calvinists, which believes that everything was ordained, that preordained, that the way things were happening on life was destined by God. And he questioned that, and his mom said, son, don't worry about that. The most important thing about religion is to love thy neighbor. And this became Horton's basic principle, to serve people and build a loving world. This was the basic value that guided everything he did. But he says it was complicated to apply this philosophy. How do you do your best to create change in an unjust society? This is the paradox that goes through the next few chapters. Early lessons came about through his own life. In work, he talks about working in a place where they created tomatoes, a tomato plant factory, and he was building the crates with other people, and he realized that they wanted a raise, and they decided, well, they were going to stop building the crates, and the owners got mad, but they said, give us a raise and we'll go back to building crates. They threatened to bring in other workers, and they said, we're the best. And after the tomatoes started mounting up, the owners decided to give them a raise. So he learned that building solidarity among the workers can bring results. Another example was in the box factory. He got really good at his job, and he worked really fast, and people started saying, slow down, you're making us look bad, and it's going to be bad on all of us. And he realized that you can't just work as an individual. You should work so that everybody benefits. Another early lesson he talks about, I thought was really interesting, was when he was playing football, and he confronted a bully who, the fullback on the opposing team, who sneered when he was planting flowers, and he liked the flowers so much he planted them by the football field. And the guy said, "Oh, who wants these sissy flowers?" And Horton thought, that's really ignorant. So he was able to tackle the guy in the field by analyzing what his movements were and getting the better of him. And when he passed out cold, he threw him in the flower bed. So he stood up against what I think is really latent homophobia, and the idea that men should act one way and women should act another way. And if a man cared about something like flowers, he was a sissy. And whether Horton really didn't talk about sexism and homophobia, this was kind of before that came to people's consciousness, but he got mad when he was considered a sissy, and he did something about it, not to prove that he was a bully like the other guy, but to prove that flowers are something to enjoy. So from this, I think he learned that analyzing a situation to see what is needed before acting is really important. In college, he also learns a number of different arguments. In terms of his own schoolwork, his professor told him, when you are writing an essay, don't just quote something, tell me if it's true. Get in there and argue. Don't just try to impress me, but take these ideas and see what they really mean. And he applied this to things like challenging Jim Crow when he was working for the YMCA. He felt he shouldn't just talk, he should find a way to put his ideas into action. So he relates the time when he created a banquet and he brought the black and white students together, and basically they ended up eating together way before the civil rights movement had challenged Jim Crow in restaurants. And it's an interesting story. I think he probably was able to do this because he was a white man. If he had been a black man, it might have been a different story. But as a white man, he was ready to challenge Jim Crow. The third chapter is called Learning. And he talks here about running a Bible camp, being hired to go around the country, the mountains, and teach young kids the Bible. And he also met a lot of people who were really interesting and wanted to create change. Some of them wanted to create cooperatives, others wanted to teach people to build toilets, and one of the preachers saw church as a job, while what he really wanted to do was help people improve their lives. And that's not really unusual. A lot of ministers really feel that way, but Horton decided that he would take it in a different direction. He talks about the ozone experiment. And I'm going to have to continue this in another video. So bear with me, and I'm going to end this and start another one.